Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar and panel discussion on negotiating uncertainties with technology solutions. As you are all aware, we are living in very unprecedented times. These are times of confusion, uncertainty, challenges, chaos. But the key resource for companies these days is a good technology foundation. Companies are finding it very tough today to stretch their financial reserves, to keep their past and future business secure, and also to open up new avenues for business. On top of all this, safety of employees is also paramount. But in between all of these challenges, the most important solution is a technology foundation. Many enterprises are realizing the need to adopt dependable technology solutions to become more lean, secure, and agile to make sure that they avail of opportunities in this uncertain environment. So in this regard, I must say on behalf of all of my colleagues at Your Story, that we are delighted to be partnering with AWS to host this webinar on negotiating uncertainties with technology solutions. We have an outstanding lineup of speakers to discuss how to make all of this work for you in these difficult times. AWS, as you all know, is a provider of technology solutions and has stood apart from the crowd with their unique solutions. So whether you're looking at addressing financial pressures or supporting remote work or ensuring business continuity or finding out how to scale infrastructure to meet spikes in demand, all of these solutions are very important to navigate in these uncertain times. To kick off these whole set of discussions, I'm going to invite Rahul Sharma, President of the Worldwide Public Sector at Amazon Internet Services Private Limited, to give us a bit of an overview on how public sector entities can carry out their duties with a greater impact by adopting technology solutions of the kind offered by AWS and its entire partner ecosystem. Over to you, Rahul. Let's have your keynote address.
Thank you so much, Madan. It's certainly an honor and privilege to be here, and thank you so much to the speakers and everybody who's participating. It's really different times that we're doing this. People talk about uncertain times, and people used to say change is the constant, and expect disruption as the business as usual. But I don't think they really expected things to actually get to this level. But if you think about the kind of attributes that are needed for success in any time that is uncertain, any time that there is significant change going around us, what are the typical attributes that are needed to be able to be successful? And when you think about technology in the paradigms of normal paradigms, you have requirements that you have to sign off, and you have to put down, this is what I need, and this is what I will sign up on, and this is how I will pay you. All those things start to sort of go out of the window a little bit in times like these. And what is really needed to be successful in uncertain times is not something that is new to startups. When I think about startups and how successful startups behave, so the three things that I think that are needed in uncertain times to move ahead. The first thing is speed and agility. How do you actually move forward with a lot of speed? How can you be really agile, because you don't know the path ahead to a longer distance? So how can you actually move forward with speed and agility? The second important thing in uncertain times that is really needed is how can you actually experiment, and how can you iterate around a set of sort of known knowns or unknown unknowns, as we say. And that's where I think the importance of quickly getting to an outcome or a failure. Failure is as important as success in uncertain times. So quickly fail, learn from it, and make sure that the next time is better. And the third is, once you have something of a solution that is bound to work, you start with an experiment, but then make it scalable. And I think those are the models that are needed across the board, not just technology, but across the board. Speed and agility, the ability to iterate and experiment, and then quickly make it scalable is what is needed for success in these uncertain times. And as I said, these are not new things for our startups. If you look at any of the startups working across the sectors in India, you can see these attributes clearly coming across. And now we see these imperatives actually becoming really important for the government. I think the government is taking the lead in deployment of technology in uncertain times, and it's really heartening to see how well some of these paradigms have been used. And I'll give you an example, a public example of Arogya Setu, which is an app which is now loaded, it's available to more than 100 million people in India, one of the fastest growing apps. But the important thing to consider in this is it was actually one of the key architects of that app was the CTO of one of the startups, GoMMT. And it was heartening to see how quickly the government sort of came to the conclusion that yes, we need that mindset if we need to be successful quickly going forward. And it was, again, I'll reiterate, it was all about speed. It was about quickly experimenting, being agile, and then making something scalable. And I think there are tons of examples. Week before last, we announced as NASSCOM the data platform for COVID response as well. And I'm sure Mr. Ranjan will talk about that. But these are some really hurting examples where startups have come in and made a huge impact to to the world around us, working closely with government and making very quick outcomes. And I think that's the real power of the GovTech as we think about what is needed to be, for the nation to sort of respond in uncertain times. And that's, I believe, something that's going to become the business as usual, the norm going forward of working between governments and startups. And I think that's the whole point about this webinar and this series of roundtables that we're doing, the power of GovTech. How can government and startups come together? And this is something that as AWS we've been doing for a long time. We've spent nearly 2 years working on this model. I remember we started this with the government of Maharashtra with the Chief Minister's Challenge, where we actually invited a set of startups working closely with government. And on the panels, we had government secretaries and key government officials who were evaluating startups as a part of the hackathon. And the idea was not to give these startups a one-time grant, but really look at a longer-term engagement and paid project so that it becomes sustainable. I remember that we had at that point in time, and this is true even now, the key impact areas that we had called out working alongside with the government were 4 key impact areas that we had identified: healthcare, agriculture, skilling, and inclusion. And I think as you think about going forward, the importance of how the government will respond, these 4 are going to become really critical areas, if not the most critical areas where government and technology need to work together. When you think about health, the work that some of our startups like Fractal are doing around AI and machine learning for analytics for quick outcomes, or Cure.ai. When you think about agriculture, it's an important intervention that is needed, and Satshore, Cropin, these are some of the names that come to mind as examples of how we're trying to raise the bar, not just in India, but across the world, on how technology can be used in agriculture. When you think about skilling, reskilling is going to be the most important mandate going forward, and it's going to be a big imperative. And I can think of startups like Metal, who do a number of online assessments, and how important that's going to be to our students who will now need to sort of take online assessments with remote proctoring. And inclusion, when you think about physical inclusion in smart cities or financial inclusion, a number of fintechs and smarter city startups are really making a huge impact. And I think that's what I really wanted to start this discussion with, making sure that we understand that technology is going to be an important parameter in the next 12 to 18 months around these uncertain times, if not the most important, and the ability for startups to really make quick impacts around being agile, being experiential and iterative, and being scalable, I think are going to be important imperatives. So once again, thank you so much for taking time off, and I'll hand over back to the moderator for the next session.
Thank you so much, Rahul. For those of you who are joining in right now, I see we have more than 100 participants now. Welcome aboard once again. We are having a webinar and panel discussion on negotiating uncertainties with technology solutions, presented by yours truly in AWS. And for those of you who just logged on now, we just heard from Rahul Sharma, who's the head for global head for worldwide public sector at Amazon Internet Services. He gave us 3 very important messages for all companies, which is speed, experimentation, and scale to survive in these uncertain times. Thank you so much, Rahul. We now move on to our next speaker. We have another distinguished speaker, Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, Secretary for IT at the Government of Telangana. He will share with us his perspective on the role of technology in helping the public sector, such as state governments and its stakeholders, as well as government technology startups, GovTech startups, to help become more effective in service delivery. So, Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Madan Mohan. Let me begin by thanking your story and AWS for organizing this webinar. This is something of tremendous interest and value to all of us, particularly here in the government. Now, as it is obvious, Government itself has been tested very thoroughly during these last 6 months when this whole COVID pandemic has played out. And we have faced multiple challenges. And even now, we cannot say that we are coming completely out of those challenges. There are still newer challenges to face, and many challenges are still continuing, particularly since the case transmission, mortality, etc., has not completely come down. So as we know, in different parts of the country, the scenarios are very different. In some parts of the country, again, I don't want to name any specific state or any region, but we all know that in some cases, in some states, it is becoming unmanageable. The health systems are getting overwhelmed. But there are also some other states where extremely efficient management practices have been rolled out, and the spread of the disease and the kind of public perceptions about the management of the disease that has come down, that has moderated quite a lot. So I feel very proud to share with you that Telangana is also one such state where we have been able to quite successfully manage the spread of this problem. The problem, I won't say that it has gone completely, perhaps beyond Kerala. No one is in the position in our country today to say that I have achieved 100% success in this COVID management. But Telangana is one of the best placed states where we have been able to successfully tackle and successfully contain the spread of this disease and all the resultant consequences in very limited areas. There are just about 32 areas in Hyderabad city, small areas, micro areas, and beyond that, the whole of the state is back to normal. And again, I feel very happy to share with you, if you look at what has happened well in Telangana, what has attributed to our successes, what has been the reason for certain other states also where things have been quite all right. I would say that a very important factor has been, a very important differentiator has been the role that technology has played, the role that tech-enabled solutions have played. And I would like to share some actual examples from Telangana. I mean, you look at multiple ways in which governments are struggling to manage this pandemic. So as all of us are aware, contact tracing and strict quarantine observance are the two very important pillars. So again, in Telangana, we have developed a very strong homegrown tool. Of course, Arogya Setu nevertheless is there, but in Telangana, much before Arogya Setu, we have our own version. And again, I'm very proud to share this with you. And this is true of many other solutions also that I'll be speaking about, that they have all been sourced from startups from within the state, a majority of them. And maybe towards the end, I'll also explain to you how it is possible in Telangana to source products and solutions from startups. So the contact tracing solution, the quarantine monitoring solution, all these have been working very effectively in Telangana. And that is the reason today when I tell you that there are only 32 micro pockets in the Hyderabad city where this problem has been contained, a large measure of this success goes to the effective solutions for quarantine monitoring, etc., and contact tracing that we have introduced. We also have a very useful app which is called Covid19. And since AWS is one of the partners for this webinar, I feel grateful to mention this, and thanks to Rahulji, that entire app, Covid19 app, is hosted on AWS. This app has, of course, lots of information, lots of data. It also has a self-test facility. So if you want to check what exactly are the symptoms that you have, and are they remotely close to COVID or not, there is a self-test possible. There is a telemedicine solution which is integrated in it. So that app is serving our citizens quite well. We also know that at this point in time, during this time, lots of misinformation spreads, lots of health cures, lots of remedies, lots of unfounded information. And again, I feel very distressed to mention this. At some point in time, lots of misinformation was spread to paint a particular community as if they are the ones who are kind of spreading this this disease, and lots of old videos taken out of context, they were spreading. So Telangana is perhaps the only state. Of course, we are the first state, but I don't know of any other state which has done this. We have created a fact-checking portal, and again, this has been done with the help of a startup called Factly, which is a homegrown startup, and this has a team of researchers, dedicated team of about a dozen people, and every piece of information which claims to offer a cure or which is today telling something about the emerging scenario, all that is checked, and immediately we inform people whether it is true or not. And citizens themselves have the facility of loading content on this fact check portal to get feedback whether they are authentic or not. We have utilized multiple other AI-based solutions, decision support systems. In fact, again, as I mentioned, since AWS is sponsoring this event, I feel again very happy to share this with you that the entire NASSCOM team, almost 11 companies, have come together to create a data-based decision support system. And some of the leading data science-based companies, just to give a name, Fractal, for example, they have participated in this particular exercise. They have created dashboards for us. There is a very strong machine learning based predictive analytic tool. And today when we have opened up multiple lines of activities in the state, again, many of you would be aware that Telangana is one of the few states where today everything is open. All industries are open, all offices are open, all kinds of commerce is open, transport is open, and there are no restrictions on anything. Many states, many places are still trying out with some 33% attendance restriction, 2 days a week or 3 days a week opening. But in Hyderabad, you are permitted to take 100% people to your offices, 100% people to your factories. And much of it is happening because of the confidence we have on these kind of tools, the tools that will tell us about the spread of transmission, about the prediction rate, what are the hotspots, and so on and so forth. We have also taken help of another startup which has given us very good predictive tools, data-based decision support system tools on what kind of impact we can see on the economic activities, on social activities after the opening up. So we are using that, and many of them have prepared very good visual maps for us to understand the scenario in a geographical sense very, very easily. We also have one particular partner in our NASSCOM team, which is giving us social media analytics. It is finding out what people are typically talking about and what they are talking about. Is it based in science? Is it just loosely happening? And so on and so forth. Telangana, as many of you would be aware, is also a state much before COVID, since the last 2.5 years or so, which has been trying out, or which has been pioneering the adoption of multiple kinds of emerging technologies, which include, for example, robotics, which includes drones, which includes big data, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, etc., that I spoke about. And again, I'm very happy to mention that we are using many of these solutions in our day-to-day COVID management activity. So our drone solution providers are playing a very big role. In the beginning, we were using them for surveillance. Later on, we found that they can be useful in other ways also. So lots of disinfectant spraying is happening through drones. Similarly, we have created a built-in layer of an AI algorithm which can help a drone-mounted camera detect whether social distancing norms are being followed in a particular area, whether masks are being worn by people or not. So very, very effective use of drone technology. Similarly, Hyderabad has also emerged as a very important center for hardware. And again, I feel very proud to share with you. We have a hardware incubator, a prototyping incubator, which is called T-Works. And T-Works has come out very successfully, very efficiently. We're having all the functionalities of a ventilator, which costs only 50,000 rupees. As many of us would know, when this pandemic hit India in the beginning, in the early stages, we started importing ventilators, and each of them were costing 5 lakh rupees, 6 lakh rupees. But today we have a homegrown, made in Hyderabad ventilator, which costs just 50,000 rupees. So the kind of collaborative environment, the kind of access to tools, the kind of access to mentors which we have been able to provide in T-Works, and this is the outcome: a great world-class ventilator with all the functionalities at 1/10 the cost. There are many such innovations happening in other parts of the city. Since T-Hub CEO is also one of the panelists, I'm not speaking in particular about what is happening in the stables of T-Hub, but I'm sure Ravi will share many such examples. So sum and substance of what I'm trying to mention is that those states which have shown better performance in managing COVID, in ensuring that life comes back to normal at the earliest, I can see a pattern everywhere, and that pattern is very high reliance on technology. And the added point which I wanted to speak particularly about Telangana is that most of the technology is homegrown, and this is something which makes me feel very, very proud. And one reason for it is that we have a policy on innovation, we have a policy on startups, which allows for this to happen, which allows for the state to procure solutions and products from startups, from homegrown startups, if they are of relevance to us. And when we do this procurement, no procurement process is followed. You don't have to participate in any bids, you don't have to participate in any tender, we can just procure it bilaterally. So this particular feature of our startup policy has been used very effectively, particularly in the times of COVID. And we hope that tomorrow, when things become normal and when people start valuing what technology did for us, for everyone during these COVID periods, the startups, the technology service providers, the large companies, the mid-scale companies, all of them will occupy a bigger center stage. And as a government, we'll be very, very happy to provide them the enabling environment and the helping hand. So these are some of the thoughts which I wanted to share with all of you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jayesh. For those of you joining in now, that was Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, Secretary of IT at Telangana. He gave us a very inspiring speech on how the government is managing testing, tracing, and tracking of patients, as well as a whole bunch of solutions, many of whom are provided by startups and big partnerships like AWS on things like decision support systems, drone management, low-cost ventilators, and even things like managing fake news and fake information to make sure that people get the right news and the right information. So very inspiring speech, and I'm sure that when we come to the new normal, we will appreciate the role played by technology-led companies and technology-led solutions. We come to the next part of our webinar today now with a fascinating interactive panel discussion. We have speakers from T-Hub, L&T, Pangeon, Citizen, and SatSure. And to moderate this panel discussion and the Q&A section for the next hour or so, I'm going to invite Deepti Vikas Dutt to take over. Deepti is the Head of Strategic Initiatives for Public Sector at Amazon Internet Services. Over to you, Deepti. Thank you.
Thanks, Madan. It's uncertain times indeed. Good evening to everyone who is tuned into this webinar. And the topic, negotiating uncertainties with technology solution, is very pertinent. And as AWS has been designed to cater to uncertainties, we talk about why do you really, how cloud can really help you design a solution, roll out quickly, fail safe, fail fast, fail safe, to cater to uncertain times. So it's interesting that we are doing this webinar at this point in time. In last 2 months of these difficult periods, we have seen many of our partners like imparters get a large number of education institutes and students to virtual classrooms. We have seen many of our partners move on to online examinations mode, work from home solutions getting adopted. COVID response solution like Arogya Setu, as Rahul called out, T-COVID solution as Mr. Jayesh Ranjan called out, so on and so forth. We've seen interesting work happen in all these areas on how do we really make these difficult times a little easier for people to cope up with. And at the heart of all these solutions, are our startup partners, our GovTech partners. As Rahul also mentioned in his keynote, right, that, it's the startups who are really helping us do interesting stuff, digital transformation stuff that's helping us make our life easier during these days. And I'm glad to be hosting this very interesting panel, where we have, and I would request each of the participants to come in. We have the CEO of T-Hub, Mr. Ravi Narayanan. Given the pioneering work T-Hub is doing in incubating startups, obviously, T-Hub and Mr. Ravi Narayan, they need no introduction to this group. Next, I would like to invite, the three startups startup CEO come co-founders that I have on panel today. 2 of them belonging to T-Hub cohort itself. So first, let me invite Pawan from Chitmonk. Chitmonk is building citizen-centric, financially inclusive Bharat, blockchain-based marketplace for chit fund companies. Next, let me invite Vamsi from Centizen. Centizen is a digital identity startup helping governments to improve service delivery and banks and other entities to have seamless customer onboarding process. Next, I would like to invite Pradeep from Satshore. Satshore is a geospatial big data platform that combines satellite imagery, machine learning algorithms with data coming from weather, IoT, drone imagery, socioeconomic data sets, etc. And they cater to industries dealing with uncertainties all the time, not just during COVID, but all the time. They cater to industries dealing uncertainties like agriculture and insurance. And finally, I would like to invite Mr. JVS Ramakrishna from L&T Smart World and Communication. They have been in forefront of large government missions such as Smart City and Safe City programs, smart metering, etc. So welcome to all my fellow panelists. It's indeed an honor to have all of you on the panel with me. And thank you for making time for this. Let me get started, Ravi, with you. Since you've been working a lot with both policymakers and startups, can you outline the broad challenges faced by state governments and GovTech startups while carrying out operations in these uncertain times?
Sure. Thanks, Deepthi. Thanks for having me on this panel and on this session. Thanks to your story as well to invite us to have this discussion. Startups and governments, working together has been one of those very important opportunities for startups to aspire for, and the governments to say that they are very nimble, very innovative, and show that they will work with them. While there are policies in place that they can come up with and also set aside a large revenue a piece of that for working with startups, most governments have difficulties in engaging with startups. And I would say from that standpoint, the government of Telangana is one that stands out, which is closer to the kind of work that is being driven by policy, but also being executed on the ground through the various different initiatives that Mr. Jay earlier. Most of the times, it is when the government officials are trying to size the problem in a way that a startup can really engage with them. How do you really parcel the larger issues that a potential SI partner of theirs or a large company that they would have usually acquired these technologies from, they could have actually gone in and done this thing. So sometimes the calibration of the size of the solution versus the size of solution that a startup brings to the table is not matching. To actually then parcel out the pieces that actually will go and get a solution from a startup is a lot of work that goes into either at the government level itself or somebody in the intermediary who can actually make this thing happen, so that there is some calibration that happens so that the startup can really engage. So as you can see, there are two startups that you have chosen from across India to actually come work with the government of Telangana and other governments, and two of them come from Telangana, from T-Hub. So it's a testimony for us to be able to parcel those pieces or that problem statement, that we can find the right set of startups to come in with their solutions, innovative solutions, disruptive solutions, but nevertheless to be able to give the definition and also source them and engage them to really bring them into the fore and make them work on solving those problems. So those are the opportunities that most GovTechs would love to have. It's a kind of a intermediary where you have the right way to actually take the thing in, or a very progressive set of people in the government who can actually source the startups at the level that they can actually engage in. So if you listen to Mr. Jayashandan, you heard him talk about very specific set of problems and a very specific set of solutions that each one of these startups that are engaging with him are coming up with. The other one, of course, is the visibility to the startup world. So AWS being a good partner with several state governments and the central government, obviously you have visibility to what are the kind of startups that are out there and who is doing great work in each one of these areas. So obviously having them or T-Hub or any of our Telangana innovation partners there helps the fact that, okay, they may be very good at staking out what the definitions of the problems are, but then really figuring out who amongst the different startups that are out there that actually are best suited to solve these problems, and evaluating them. The way you evaluate a regular vendor, one is that to creating the right commercial, do you do an L1, T1 for a startup? Do you get a 3 years balance sheet from a startup? These are certain processes and mechanisms that you really need to be able to overcome. And the reason they do that is to make safeguard, the way the government has to work. But at the same time, there is a level of trust and credibility that certain other partners can bring to the table, and therefore using that to create a much larger visibility of startups to come, invite them to be part of the digitalization of the government process, governance and products services. I think that's where you will begin to see a lot more happening. I think as a government, the central government and the state governments, we have great policies, but there are certain state governments that are much further along in their ability to put this into action. And one of them that you see here is the government of Telangana. So those are some of the best processes, best cases, case studies that we can bring to the table so that other people in the audience, either startups or government officials, can actually learn from.
Great, thanks for the overview, Ravi. Let me move to Vamsi. Citizen, as I mentioned, has been doing interesting work in digital identity space. And personally, digital identity is very close to my heart. Having worked at Aadhaar during its foundational years. Vamsi, you have been working very closely on Aadhaar-based digital identity system and other related solutions, which you have adapted very well for COVID times where contactless solutions are required, etc. Plus, changing regulations and things like that. So can you provide some context on how cloud and other emerging technologies are helping you carry out these targeted and impactful public outreach programs?
So basically, we work on the complete Aadhaar solutions, doing around more than 3 million transactions on a daily basis. And if you ask me, we work on a zero tolerance system. So we don't have a choice. Like if a customer is in front of a citizen service center like MeSeva, or is in front of any of the government service, we have absolutely no chance to take time to perform a transaction. So we have an always on system which works on 24/7, and it's a zero tolerance system that we work on. And the volumes are completely unpredictable. I mean, all of a sudden we see a lot of volumes because some scheme, some district has taken up some initiative which will throughput the transactions very high. So at this stage, I think a kind of cloud environment which enables us to quickly scale the backend transactions and to have an always on, always subsystem is something that I can mention here. And so starting from a lakh transactions a day to around 30 lakh transactions a day is something that we have seen the pain points of scaling as a start in a regular native hardware. When we move on to a cloud, then that's where we have eases up the entire process. So when you ask me about the other systems, when the COVID hit has been happened, and then we are really worried because most of the transactions are coming from biometric and retina-based scanning, which is completely a contact-based transaction. And the government is very clear that to stop the contact-based authentication systems, which may spread viruses. So that's where I really appreciate our advisory board. When we got funded by MasterCard, we have a lot of ideation sessions to plan for. Vamsi, you should always have a plan B and plan C ready in the system. So you are doing a lot of centric business with the regulator. And that's where we started working on a couple of other initiatives, mainly on the facial recognition stack, and also the liveness technologies. We started very slow on it, and one classic example that we have done is for RTA department of Telangana, the road transport department. So we have digitized more than 36 different services of transport department. For example, somebody has lost their driving license and they just want to get a duplicate copy. They don't need to visit the transport office. All they can do is download the app of the government and then establish their identity by just showing their face. We do the liveness checks to make sure that he's is a live person. It's not a fake photo or so. Then he has to do pay online and then get the service. So that's something that we started with, and that makes us enable with a complete contactless based authentication systems ready in a pandemic situation like this, when we have orders from the government to stop any kind of contact based transactions. We immediately able to position the right stack. But at the same time, at this time, facial recognition kind of technology needs a lot of GPU power, and who else can give us a better hardware on demand, on the go? So we are able to scale faster in a cloud environment to cater the needs of other transactions in the state.
Any other examples you'd like to share with us, Vamsi, on what else you have? You mean uncertain regulations that you're working on, etc.
So we have built a video KYC solution for the BFSI sector mainly. So this is the time where people can't actually visit to the bank branches, or say it is an NBFC or a bank. So to visit the branch and opening an account is a very tough process because of the situation outside. So we have built a video KYC process at par with the RBI regulations, where you just need to enter into a video call with a banker and just capture your PAN card and Aadhaar card, and then answer a couple of questions, and then you are onboarded. You don't need to visit any branch. And this also works on there's a lot of AI ML stack that we are doing checks and sums. You should be an Indian origin. All your cards will be forensic checks will be done using the deep learning techniques that we have. We do facial stack between Aadhaar, PAN, and live photos. And it's an RBI approved thing. And we are getting this for a couple of banks live soon. And that's something which we are quickly able to develop during this COVID, and then we get it live. And a few more other solutions, mainly on most of the compliance heads of various banks and NBFCs are very keen to use COVID as an efficient time for them to comply with all the regulations. And one such regulation is to block out all the Aadhaar numbers as a matter of privacy in all their databases. So that's where we have masked more than 10 million transactions of 10 million Aadhaar numbers in different systems using our AI ML stack. So all of these things all suddenly came up in the market, and then so that's something that we are currently working on.
It's very interesting that how you're using cloud and technology to really balance between cater to both regulatory requirements as well as citizen services, while ensuring that both are fulfilled. So on that note, Pawan, let me come to you. You run a very interesting solution on creating marketplace for chit funds, and and that correlates very well to the mission that we have at AWS public sector team in India, where our mission states that we want to impact life of every citizen of the country through a positive AWS engagement. And we have a very special focus on bottom of the pyramid. So, and since we're in this topic of trust, regulation, compliances, etc., right? And you are catering to Bharat, financially inclusive Bharat and things like that. So can you give us an example of how technology has made it possible to bring in trust, regulation, etc., in industry that are catering to bottom of pyramid?
Absolutely. So, like Ravi was talking in the beginning of the session, right? So it's about government playing the role of an intermediary already, right? See, a lot of services which is offered to the citizens today, government plays a role of an intermediary. I mean, even if you take a simple example of a financial transaction happening between two people, money transferring from one person to another person, RBI kind of plays a role of an intermediary where the money kind of gets settled and pushed to the other person, right? So there's always an intermediary, and what we have, I mean, our solution is completely actually trying to reimagine how we can reduce the work of these intermediaries using the blockchain technology, basically. Essence of bringing the decentralized systems with more and more consensus driven system, right? So that's the idea of, which has kind of triggered the idea to go ahead and implement this solution in our fintech space, especially. And like you said, chit funds again kind of is the real first financial inclusion instrument, is what I call. I keep telling them, Chick fund kind of caters to the both bottom of the pyramid and the middle of the pyramid, right from the lowest level of gig worker to even a white collar job. There are chit groups which cater to everyone, even SMEs or government employees, private employees, anybody you can take. I mean, even farmers kind of participate in chit fund activities and all, right? That's the first financial inclusion instrument. But the challenge in that space was more in terms of the trust and transparency in the operations, right? So many we keep hearing a lot of stories about trust and loss of trust and transparency in the chit fund business, and which is leading to a lot of money, leakage of money in the business as well, right? So that's exactly what we said. Hey, can we look at using a technology, emerging technology like blockchain, and solve this problem? And thankfully, thanks to Jay Shandan sir also, who's also there in the panel today. We pitched this idea from our side to the Telangana government, and they rightly jumped into it and said, okay, let's do a pilot. And we went ahead and implemented a pilot, and from pilot it is now scaled across the Telangana state as well. So today, as we speak, the entire state of Telangana is using our technology to manage and administer the entire chit fund activities across the state. So close to about 19,000 crores of money is kind of being managed on the platform per year today. I mean, if you understand, close to 1.2 million subscribers, their transactions related to their chit activities are kind of brought onto this platform. So, and it's all driven by blockchain tech and the cloud tech, of course. I mean, we use extensively all the cloud services provided by you as well, and kind of it helps today. I mean, if you look at it's been almost like 1.5 years, close to 20 months, I would say. We launched the solution already, and if you look at the applicability of the solution today, it is really important, right? I mean, we kind of moved the entire, I mean, as a fintech platform, as a fintech product, the biggest thing in the fintech process is collecting a lot of documentation, and doing financial transactions also online kind of thing, right? And that is something which we have moved already into the system, and it is well established. Imagine if we have to do that kind of setup today, post COVID. I mean, the inertia, I mean, though everybody would like to get into digital space and all, there's a lot of there could be still a lot of friction in terms of getting there and using it. But today, the entire chit fund administration is 100% online, and there's no need of a person to come online, come to office and do any activity kind of thing. So 100% online, and they're able to do everything full-fledged on the platform now.
It's very interesting. We heard of digital identity, financial inclusion, usage of technologies like video, GPU, blockchain, etc. And Prateep, I know you use a lot of satellite imagery, machine learning, weather data, etc. for the work that you do in space of agriculture, disaster recovery, and things like that, right? So and you have been at forefront of many emergency response situations even before COVID. Like you work extensively during Kerala floods, insurance claim settlement for cyclones such as Titli, and etc. So how are you really able to, and I'm aware that you usually turn around your solutions in 2 to 3 days time, because these disasters cannot really have a long gestation period. So how are you really able to handle such solutions in such short time frame?
Thanks, Deepti. It's very it's an interesting problem, especially the disaster response, because the turnaround time for the information has to be very short. And that means huge amount of data has to be computed very easily and quickly. And I think that's one of the key areas where our solution running on AWS is very advantageous, because you can use the auto scaling and load balancing features to essentially put any number of machines in parallel and compute billions of pixels and data points in a very short period of time. So apart from the speed, I think there are other factors which come into play. So for example, when we are working with the government, satellite is one of the key sources, because data information flow from bottoms up may not happen during those periods. So ease of integration of API services, ease of integration of any other kind of data that is coming, streaming data like mobile network or weather station data, that is also very easy to integrate into our platform, because we are again using the Kinesis pipeline for data ingestion. And since all this different sensor data starts coming in, we have to continuously provide the most accurate assessment. And while we have built our models, the retraining of these models can be done quite fast using the frameworks which are available on SageMaker. So doing this on the fly helps us to continuously provide the most updated and accurate information. This has been quite successful for us. We have, as you mentioned, been involved in many different disaster responses with governments. And one of the key things to understand here is that our business process becomes tied in with the need of the hour for the government and their entire machinery. So that means 24/7 we have to be up. Our servers can't go down, and all these things we don't have to today take care. Thankfully, because on AWS we are getting everything as a managed service. So we are using tools like CloudWatch, where we can create triggers where there is a, let's say, 80% of load on a single machinery, so we can immediately deploy another machine. Then we have used services like the LexBot that can be easily deployed as a conversational chatbot to take in queries from the field and quickly provide the information short with amount of time. So all of this put together, I think earlier, which something that used to take 2 to 3 weeks, today we are able to do it in 2 to 3 days. Entire data ingestion, processing, analysis, and hosting interactive dashboards and providing the overall messaging and communications infrastructure on a single platform. So it's a convergence of technologies in my mind. There is satellite technology, there is AI ML, and then there is cloud, which is the base infrastructure, which is enabling all of this today.
Very interesting point, and yeah, moving from 2 to 3 weeks to 2 to 3 days is really remarkable. And I think, if people had to really go and build a data center and then do it, it would be 2 to 3 months and not even 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah. So, so with that, let me move on to the next set of thought that I have around how do we really manage procurement for government, right? So as Ravi also pointed out that, there are challenges on how do we connect startups and government, how do we do sourcing, how do we do risk management for both startup and government. And we realize this during our large-scale implementations also that, and not just one startup, any large-scale implementation like smart city or agriculture, they require multiple solutions to come together from multiple startups or solution providers. And at the same time, government wants to de-risk, have multiple solutions over a long period of time. And startups also may not really have wherewithal to invest in a long term and cater to large scale implementation. So, at AWS, like the way we have designed the GovTech program, it's based on 3 pillars really. Demand represented by government agencies, the supply side represented by solution providers and startups that we have on the panel today. And finally, the third leg of the third pillar of the entire GovTech program for us is the fulfillment agencies through system integrators such as L&T. And L&T and AWS have been working closely in some large transformation programs like smart cities, etc. Ravi, I'll come back to you. We have heard multiple startups, what they are doing and their own vision on way forward. Given that you have been interacting very closely with policymakers and startups, can you provide your perspective on the future role of technology in public sector, and especially how startups can work with government for digital transformation of public services? What future roadmap you see?
Yeah, I think in terms of the government wanting to have digital transformation happen in and around them, and that being a big success, a feather in their cap, I guess it's no longer a distinction. It is actually a requirement for them to be relevant, especially if they want to roll out their services to the citizenry and provide those services to the remotest parts of the country. And I think while that was an aspiration that was there, COVID came by and made it almost an urgent requirement. going forward, because your ability to be relevant, your ability to process the data that is coming in, streaming in terabytes, and being able to take decisions based on that, so that you are able to do the right things for the people at the right times. I think it's almost a requirement now to actually start doing that. Fortunately, startups have that wherewithal, and we don't even have to look very much beyond the borders of India. There are lots of startups in India. We have the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. I still think we have the third largest ecosystem in the world. And we may actually take this as an opportunity to leapfrog some of our competing countries that are building their ecosystems, because we have pretty much gotten an opportunity on a platter to really go out and solve so much larger problems that our potential customers have become a lot more open to and a lot more conducive to actually accepting, because one, they have seen that they were unprepared when this emergency showed up. They were not completely scaled to the opportunity, and they did not have the response time that was required to make this thing happen. All of this is made possible by technology. All this is made possible by data. And I think it's becoming more and more important now to actually make this thing happen as a way forward. I think one of the things that I would like to call out again, because I'm close to the government of Telangana, is that there is a specific department within the IT department with Mr. Jayashandan heads. There is a specific department called Emerging Technologies. So they're constantly mapping what are the different opportunities or different problems that are being solved through the startup solutions. So they have a good sense on the radar as to what's going on, not just in terms of technology, but also in terms of AI, which can then process the data, create the right algorithms, create the right insights to be able to deliver those services. So all of these things are happening, and they become the on-ramp to a lot of these kinds of startups to get into the government. While they may be the most educated, the most clued in department within the government, but it is also a various set of other people that actually take the opportunity to go make the other departments of the government more sensitized to the possibilities and the kind of solutions that are out there. So one of the programs that I want to call upon is what we call as the government mentor program within Telangana, which is, we are not asking people to buy anything from startups. We're not asking them to map what they are facing to a startup at this point in time. It's just a matter of exposing them to the possibility, because there is so much that can be done, yet there is so much ignorance in a lot of departments, because the way they have been looking at solving these problems have not necessarily got startups as a mainstream, and it's not in their radar. So how do you really sensitize them to this whole aspect? How do you get them ready to start thinking in this fashion, which I alluded to in the beginning of my session, and see how that can happen? So progressively over time, one, from acculturization, sensitization, to be able to start engaging on a POC level, to then actually bringing startups for a much more production ready kind of solutions. I mean, that's a process. You can't just go and leapfrog into the very beginning or at the end of the process. So all these things are something that has to happen, and that is the way you actually open up their minds to the possibility of what technology can bring to the table, and how cost effective they are, how the efficacy of these programs. All these things become much more relevant. And then when you go into a POC, like for example, Chipmunks that Pawan has been working, they went through a POC for quite some time. Once that became very, very apparent and they could see the value, they were ready to move to the next level. So I think while conceptually people will read in newspapers and in different places in your story that all these things are happening, but how does it really affect them in their lives? That happens just because of these kinds of interactions. And I think technology will completely transform possibilities as we go along. And I think this may be the right opportune time, because we are going into the new normal, and the new normal will require all government organizations to look at technology very, very closely, because they will offer solutions to them that they will have to build for in the new normal.
Totally agree, great insights. So JV, I'll come back to you. So I was just talking about that, how do we weave in together? How do we, bring together government, startups, and large system integrators like yourself to de-risk all the three entities from technology obsolescence, large-scale implementation experience, so on and so forth. So can you outline, how certain technology solutions can help you improve key metrics for large government projects?
See, we have this business called Smart World and Communication, which wherein we have been partnering with around 25 cities in India, predominantly working on the technology interventions to help the cities under the smart city mission. In addition to that, we also work with various police agencies in terms of the surveillance and traffic management and so on and so. So one of the key things what we actually face is, especially when we are talking to the government, I think there are a lot of pre-qualification issues and all those things, which we keep seeing. Organizations like us, actually, we are more like speed, scale, and all those things. But what generally we all lack is in terms of the innovation. That's where actually the startups will play a very, very important role. So the way what we actually do is, we actually have got something called Technology Innovation Center, when we actually incubate quite a few startups. Try help them to solve the problems the way actually it is seen, not just the technology problem. I mean, we take the government, for example, some of the some are quantifiable results. Some of the numbers which actually you can see in the public domain is, for example, in traffic, road fatalities in say Nagpur has come down by almost 6%, because of the way you actually push the technology solutions to improve the enforcement. For example, Mumbai, it has come down by 22%. Similarly, some of the things like, if you take crime rate, for example, in Hyderabad has come down almost by 32%. So what happens is, these are the very tangible metrics which we can measure. There are many intangible things that also come in terms of the ease of doing business for the people with the government. For example, in terms of some of the e-governance solutions. For example, emergency alert. For example, in one of the cities in Visakhapatnam, we have implemented this WISE women safety system in the buses, for example. So these are some of the assuring solutions that are there. All these things would not have been possible without having the startup ecosystem. Just for your information, we actually spend close to 30 to 35% of our annual spend from the smart world and communication on the startups. So it's a very large ecosystem for us, and there are good amount of such tangible outcomes that are coming in. Some of the things, for example, we have done few good things like, with the help of a couple of startups, what we recently did in Telangana, Medaram Jatra, in terms of helping the government on the crowd control, for example. So there are quite a few people working on in that particular area. But again, how do you solve the problem? Because there is always a technology solution. These guys are struggling. They're getting in innovation in place. But how do you make a use case out of it is where system integrators play an important role. At the same time, as Mr. Ravi was talking about, taking them the government is a big long journey, right? That's where we play an important role, incubating those solutions and then scale them up over the period of time.
Okay, great. Thanks for that insight. And I think we are opening up. We're getting a lot of questions from the audience. So let me start passing on some of these questions to the panelists. And I think there are one or two questions for me as well. So the first question, Vamsi, it's for you. The question says, are you utilizing all the services of India Stack? Otherwise, also, the person who's asked the question, he wants to know how easy it is or how difficult it is to utilize India Stack services.
Yeah, thanks, Deepti. So, are we using services of India Stack? We are one of the prime contributors of India Stack program. In fact, we are under identity space, we are under authentication services, we provide e-sign services, we are under DigiLocker services. Apart from GST, I think in every program of India Stack, we are the prime contributors of those services. Yeah, so India Stack is it's a very good platform for any kind of startup to quickly consume the services and bring up the systems rather than deep diving into the much into the problem statement. They can simply consume the services. So yeah. So it's a good platform to startups to leverage on.
Yeah, and it's all API based integration, with all reusable code, everything published. So I think that makes it all the more easier for people to adopt, right? Yeah. The second question is for me. It says, can you share some examples of collaboration between AWS, startups, and government, and how it's helping in ease of doing business? I think we heard many of these examples throughout. I mean, one is so when we engage with startups, the entire GovTech program that we have, it's actually built on 2 or 3 key levers. Okay, so one lever is of course the technology enablement that we do with our startups, right? So in terms of how do we help them do early proof of concepts, how do our solutions architect work with the startup technology team to optimize and use right technology, how do we get them to scale and things like that. So that's one key area that we focus on. Second thing that we focus on is how do we really connect startups to government entities, right? So I talked about one such initiative where we triangulate, we bring together the SIs like L&T that we have on this panel. So how do we bring together SIs and startups and government onto one single platform? How do we connect and how do we help SIs leverage startups to pitch their solution in large contracts that they are picking up with the government? What we also do is, we also do a one-on-one connect with mature startups who have a little proven solution, or even, initial stage startups. So we run a lot of these programs like Innovation Challenge program, or we do these kind of cloud adoption workshops and things like that, where we get startups to present their solution to different government entities. Government agencies like SATSHUR has been in many of those events and many of those kind of programs that we have run, where a startup would come and present to a panel of government officers on what is it that they have to offer, and we design it in such a way that if government likes it, they think that the startup solution adds value to the government, then there's a mechanism developed on how proof of concepts pilots can be done, how that can be converted into commercial engagement. So that's the second lever that we have in our GovTech program, that how do we really connect startups to consumers, customers and consumers. And this is not just limited to public sector, but within enterprise segment, we have this entire thing on enterprise connect kind of a program where startups get connected to the enterprise. So that's second big focus that we have. Third, what we also do is we help startups also get a lot of visibility and PR activities, be it getting them visibility through various interviews and international publication, India-based publication, analyst reports and things like that, because the more visibility you get for your good solutions, the chances of you getting funding or more customer acquisition and all that becomes easier. So these are the 3 key things that we work with on startup partners: technology enablement, go-to-market enablement, and PR exercise. I'll move to the next question that we have from audience, and Ravi, that's for you, Ravi. The question is, what should be the priority areas startups should immediately address to manage uncertainties in these current times?
The way we look at this is, they are threefold. I think way back in early April, late March, we began this journey of trying to understand whether this is a anomaly or is it a kind of a change that has come about that we need to be getting ready to go through. So there was a lot of existential kind of questions that a lot of startups were asking as to how do they actually deal with this kind of a thing. But it's an interesting question for the startups to ask, because they actually want risk and they are taking the risk to really build the new normal. And now if there is uncertainty being introduced, much more than they had anticipated, yes, you still need to be able to innovate through that. The second set of problems usually are, they are onto some good opportunity in the market. They have built the technology. There are customers that are out there that are going to buy from them. How do you really, live the rest of the 3-4 months so that you can get back to serving those customers, maybe with a little bit of a tweaked product or a new feature, or a little bit more efficiency or a slightly different price. But it's an incremental change to where you were, but you were actually still able to hunker down and bring down your cash flows and come out the other side. So there are lots of efficiency kind of productivity kind of discussions, cash management discussions that we ask them to go through so that they can actually get past this. And then there is a third, which is, as I mentioned earlier, here is a huge set of new opportunities that are being handed to these startups on a platter. Yes, you can't make sense of it right away, but here it is. If you are, lamenting that your competition is, eating your lunch. If you are lamenting that, oh my God, these customers are so far away in a different time zone, I can't reach them. Suddenly, and you are, hoping that God would do something to help you out. Actually, God did that. He actually pressed the reset button and said, okay, your competition is as hobbled by these circumstances as you are. Now you can reach everybody digitally. You can not only do business development digitally, you can also execute your projects digitally. Here it is. And AWS and other cloud providers are able to provide you the ability to reach these customers. So how do you really go back to the drawing board, maybe enlarge your vision, and go out and beat the competition at their own game? So all of these things are good things that are happening in my opinion. Of course, people who are running out of cash, they will have existential issues, and therefore they need to look at bridge loans and so on and so forth. But those are things that can be handled as long as you are not paralyzed by the situation. You are able to innovate through it. You are able to come out with your new business model. I think this is a ready-made situation for you to really get this new startup going, if not the same startup going. So I think it's a great thing for all of us. Unfortunately, as I say this, I also know that almost 50% of these the startups in India are having situations where they are probably not going to make it, or they will make it in a very, very different way. But there are other 50% of them that are actually already in the process of building new products, new features, have new business models, so on and so forth, which is phenomenal. In just 2 months, they have been able to make that happen. So I think I'm very optimistic about our Indian startup ecosystem to really come through this much more strongly than the way we entered the situation.
I totally agree. Digital and everything being online will be new mantra, and I think we'll see a lot of startups pivoting themselves to what they can, how they can leverage technology more and more and enable more, remote working and those kind of things. Pradeep, next question is for you. The question is, can you please share something on way to use satellite imagery in predicting crop maturity and also possible yield?
Sure. We are doing this activity for both governments as well as insurance and banking sector. So the way satellites work is that it captures the reflectance from the canopies of the crops and any kind of reflectors from a land surface, and this happens across different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. So for example, we are seeing each other in color part of the visible part of the spectrum, but satellites capture also information in near infrared, very near infrared, in small bands. So by looking at the spectral response and a change in time series, we are able to predict different things like whether the crop is sown, when the crop is getting mature, which means ready for harvesting, and even by applying clustering techniques, different kind of AI techniques, we are able to say what crop is growing where. So the usage of such tools is pretty rampant today, and India is one of the countries leading this kind of digitization of agriculture, with a huge government push towards satellite-based crop monitoring.
Great, perfect. The next question, JVS, is for you. The question is, how do you see the smart city construct changing post this uncertain time? How will L&T support the new normal?
Well, the whole smart city construct, actually, when we ourselves have seen in 2 months, there is a sudden huge appetite for the digital solutions dealing various contactless services, right? So we see a huge difference. We have seen a lot of digital interventions. For example, in some of these cyclones, if you would see, not only during COVID, even before the COVID, if you have to evacuate massive number of people in the coastal districts, suppose in Cyclone Fani, for example, technology played an extremely important role, which actually, literally, it has brought down the life loss to zero. So I think we see huge digitalization efforts happening in the in the GovTech space. Good part is, if you see that, government clients are extremely more keen than what they were earlier in terms of the technology interventions in solving their day-to-day problems. So we see, it's going to play an important role. In the new normal, well, I mean, new normal is something we don't know what is that new normal. We are still in the learning phase, But new normal, what we can definitely see is there will be some social distancing, there will be some sort of contactless things coming in. So we see huge change coming in the way we commute, the way we work, the way government services are offered. For example, already a couple of customers are talking to us saying that, look, can we put in a remote, kiosk sort of thing rather than helping people to come to pay some taxes and all those things. In fact, Hyderabad, there actually police is thinking about, is there a way we can actually make police stations a bit more contactless? So there are quite a few things that are coming out, and then people are talking about it. But I think most of these solutions will emanate in the next couple of months, and as we really hit what is new normal. For us, we think there will be huge disruption that's going to happen in the digital space and in the infrastructure, that is the smart infrastructure. I would also like to share another example. The typical electricity meters. I think, the way actually they are deployed. If you see UP and Haryana, during this lockdown phase, because of the smart meter and the 2G, 3G type of connectivity, the governments are able to collect, bills for about 95% efficiency than any time, never ever. So we are able to do an automatic connect, reconnect, using these solutions. So these solutions will scale up, and there's a huge appetite for the solutions when India is going for, say, 250, crore, smart meters, in India. So I think huge digitalization opportunities are there. I think one of the key things that AWS has also been working with us in terms of getting a smart energy platform like that, because no small company or big company can scale to the scale what is the work actually India is looking at. I think new normal is going to be very interesting from the technology point of view.
I totally agree. If I may also add, what we're also noticing is, and a couple of our partners like Quantella, which also happens to be L&T's partner and our joint partner. So what we're also noticing is that a lot of smart city solutions are getting repurposed, if I may add, like the ICCC platform, right? Now that's getting repurposed to become a war room and become a platform on how do you really do better COVID response, emergency response, and things like that. And now cities are suddenly realizing so much more value on, how do you really use technology to cater to these, unprecedented needs and healthcare and those kind of things. So, can that really, the citizen app and field officer app and ICCC that we talk about, can they really become healthcare app instead? Can they be repurposed for that as well? And we're seeing that happening in many cities now. So yeah, so I think the post-COVID scenario will be interesting on faster adoption of technology and repurposing of many technology that we had pre-COVID phase. We are reaching end of the thing of the entire session, and Pawan, the last question that we have, the generic question, and I'll pass it on to you. Any suggestion on good practices on work from home tips and tricks for any startups?
So the question is more in terms of best practices for startups, right? So if you are a tech startup and building tech products for the customers, right? I think it's a good way of reducing your capital expenditure. You don't have to probably spend a lot of money on the rent and office expenses. You can very well manage most of the activities. I think it has definitely brought a shift of mindset, especially when we are talking about how to manage the work delegated and also. Again, it's different during lockdown. Work from home and work from home in general is very, very different. Okay, so a lockdown work from home, you can get actually more than 8 hours of work, no questions asked, because pretty much you are inside the house. But when you are working from home and when there is everything else open up, we still have to see how the productivity can be looked at and monitored. But we have seen definitely increase in productivity during lockdown, working from home, no questions asked. And we have launched a couple of products also within this lockdown period. I mean, we were waiting to launch for some time, and we were able to do it, at least from Chipmunk's side. I can say that we have launched 2 products within this lockdown time, and 2 releases, especially targeting the B2B side and the B2C side as well. So I would say the norm will change as the lockdown opens, and I think we are all in this to learn together. I mean, I think how things can change in terms of productivity and monitoring, we'll probably have to wait and see.
Yeah, and the interesting, very interesting thing that you're launching 2 new products. In fact, a lot of startup CEOs and CTOs that I talk to, what they're also doing is that they're using this time of lockdown, because all travel has been cut down and they can't really go and visit customers personally. So a lot of CTOs are also spending this time in actually really looking and focusing on technology part of it, and what's been like dragging on for quite some time, really focusing on that. So yeah, that's an interesting.
Your technical debt in terms of the product development kind of comes down at this point of time, because we as a founder and technology person who's looking into the product management, right? You kind of push most of the technical debt because you always prioritize business, and now there is no one to go and meet, so you always tend to clear the technical debt and say, hey, okay, let's get things moving faster so that this will help us in the future. That's how we focused on. We've almost cleared a lot of technical debt. We automated a lot of things in this time, and we kind of pushed 2 products.
I think with this, I mean, I would like to thank all 5 of you. Many thanks for making time and joining us on this panel. Great insights from each one of you, and I'm sure I would like to thank you also on behalf of all the people who have tuned on to this webinar, and on behalf of all the panelists, I would like to thank all the people who have dialed in, taken time out to listen to us. With this, I would like to hand over again to Madan for the concluding remarks. Madan, over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Pawan. Thanks, Vamsi, JVS, and Prateek. Thank you, Deepti, for anchoring this panel. We now come to the end of our hour-and-a-half long program. I want to thank again all the speakers and the sponsors for this session. Key takeaways from this panel we just heard were the importance of sensing, sense-making, and sensitization, which is how to get data from all these different sources and how to make it available for those who need to see this information. Second is sensitization, how to make sure that people get this information in such a way that it is used for the right reasons and by the right people. And lastly, sense making, how do you interpret all this information coming in real time from so many sources, from different channels and so on. Key message from Jayesh Ranjan's session just before this, the importance of orchestration, how no single agent has all the answers, all the solutions. You need to have government and technology and startups all coming together. Key takeaways from Rahul Sharma's session before this was 3 ones, speed, experimentation, and scale. Without these 3, you can't survive in this age of uncertainty. And the overall message, I think, coming from this whole panel was a message of optimism, that there are 3 things we will look back to when we come to the new normal, not if, when we come to the new normal. We will look back and appreciate the creativity of the startups who, despite such uncertain situations, are going ahead with fire in the belly to find a solution. Secondly is the scale of technology solutions providers who are allowing different ideas and solutions to scale up to millions, hundreds of millions of people. And last but not least, the important role of progressive and responsible governments who are keeping their eye on the agenda. Thank you all very much to our team at AWS, our team at Your Story, and all the people joining this discussion online. We will have an article summarizing the key messages on Your Story. Keep seeing Your Story every day for updates on what's happening to startups in this period of uncertainty. Thank you all very much and have a good day, a good evening ahead. Cheers.